A desperate loan, a vengeful bond, and a courtroom drama that asks, what is the true meaning of justice and mercy? Welcome, everyone, to a brand new deep dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into the challenging and, well, endlessly fascinating world of William Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice.
Indeed. And this isn't just, some dusty old play. This is
Right.
genuinely one of Shakespeare's most complex and, let's be honest, most controversial works.
Absolutely.
It's just renowned for these incredibly compelling, deeply human characters and some really thorny ethical questions that still hit home today, remarkably so.
For sure. So our mission in this deep dive, we want to explore its core plot, which is pretty intricate, really dig into those central characters that make it so unforgettable, and unpack the enduring themes, the big ideas that give this play its incredible power, even, 400 years later?
Right. We're aiming to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from this really rich material.
Yeah, to really understand what The Merchant of Venice tells us about human nature, about justice, prejudice, which is a huge one here, and how these powerful ideas still echo in our own world. So, are you ready?
Let's get into it.
Okay. Unpacking the plot. A story of bonds, caskets, and courtroom drama. Right, so let's start by setting the scene. We've got two really distinct worlds here, but they're deeply tangled up with each other. First, you have 16th century Venice,
Bustling.
totally bustling, a massive commercial hub. Think crossroads of trade, ambition, money, merchants, bankers, it's all happening.
International commerce, yeah.
And then completely different vibe, you have Belmont. This is Portia's estate. It's idyllic, wealthy, almost dreamlike, governed by totally different rules.
And what's really crucial here is the historical context of Venice itself.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just any city. It was the major financial center in Europe back then, a hub for global trade.
Right.
So this meant Christians and Jews were interacting daily, doing business. It was absolutely essential for the city to function, economically speaking.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
No, not at all. Beneath that surface of, deals and ducats, there was this palpable undercurrent of tension. Real, deep-seated societal prejudices, restrictive laws. It fundamentally shaped how people lived and interacted. This setting, it's not just wallpaper, it's absolutely key to the conflicts, the characters' motivations, everything.
Okay, so into this world steps Antonio.
Yeah.
He's the merchant of the title. Respected guy, seems successful, but when the play opens, he's got this strange sadness hanging over him.
Melancholy, yeah.
And more practically, he's in a tight spot financially. All his money, all his investments are tied up in ships out at sea. He's cash poor, basically.
Liquid assets are zero.
Exactly. And then his dearest friend, Bassanio, comes to him needing money, specifically 3,000 ducats. Big sum.
Not small change.
Not at all. And Bassanio doesn't just want it for himself. Well, not directly. He needs it to go to Belmont, impress and woo this wealthy heiress, Portia. His plan is to marry her and fix his own money problems.
Yeah, Bassanio's financial situation is, well, he's reckless. It's clear right away. He's already disabled his estate, lived way beyond his means. Seems kind of casual about debt,
Yeah.
But Antonio's generosity is just as striking, maybe even surprisingly deep. He sees his bond with Bassanio as more than just friendship. It's almost sacred, like a debt of love.
Right. He says his purse, his person, his extremist means are all unlocked for Bassanio.
Exactly. It immediately sets up this core dynamic, financial, personal,
Yeah.
that really drives the whole plot.
Yeah.
And Antonio's devotion is almost self-sacrificial.
So Antonio doesn't have the cash. His ships are out there somewhere. So he does something pretty significant. He goes to Shylock, a Jewish moneylender. Now, Shylock is understandably reluctant at first, and you feel it immediately, this deep-seated, simmering resentment he has towards Antonio. It's not just business, is it? There's history.
Oh, absolutely. Loads of history.
Yeah.
Shylock has very real, historically grounded reasons for hating Antonio, and frankly, a lot of Christians. First off, Antonio lends money gratis.
Yeah.
For free.
Undercutting him.
Directly. It drives down the interest rates, the usance that Shylock can charge. And money lending, while Christians look down on it, was Shylock's profession. Often the only profession really open to Jews in places like Venice then.
So Antonio's charity is basically an economic attack.
In a very real way, yes.
Yeah.
But it goes much, much deeper than just ducats. Antonio, Shylock tells us directly, publicly insults him, humiliates him for being Jewish, calls him a dog.
Spits on his clothes, the Jewish gabardine.
Right, that distinctive robe Jews were often forced to wear, marks them out. And Shylock, in an aside, reveals this burning desire to feed fat the ancient grudge he holds. It's not just about Antonio. It's about generations of prejudice, mistreatment by the Christian community.
Which brings us to the bond, the deal they strike. And this is where it gets, well, really disturbing.
Yeah.
It's 3,000 ducats, 3 months. But the forfeit, if Antonio defaults, it's not interest, it's a pound of flesh from Antonio's own body. And Shylock actually calls it a merry sport, a humble suit, which, given everything we just heard about his resentment, it just lands with this incredibly sinister thud. Feels like a trap waiting to spring.
And that bond, it seems so bizarre, right? But it taps into really important historical context about usury, about lending money at interest.
Because Christians weren't supposed to do it.
Generally, no. Religious doctrine forbade it. The idea was that money shouldn't breed on its own. That was seen as unnatural, against God's order. But, of course, people still needed loans.
So that pushed money lending onto Jewish communities.
Largely, yes. They weren't bound by the same Christian rules. But while it was economically necessary, it also made Jews targets for animosity, fed into those awful stereotypes about greed.
And Antonio's way of making money, ships, trade, risk, that was seen as okay.
Seen as honorable, red-blooded even, facing the perils of the sea. Shylock's trade, though, dealing in abstract money, interest, viewed as suspicion, disdain, often, like he was just growing money without real work, which just fueled the prejudice.
Okay, meanwhile, over in Belmont, Bassanio's mission is going way better.
Much better.
He manages to figure out Portia's father's crazy will. The whole casket lottery thing, gold, silver, or lead. Choose right, you get Portia. Choose wrong.
You leave and swear never to marry anyone. High stakes.
Totally. And Bassanio, maybe he's smart, maybe lucky, he picks the plain lead casket.
Yeah.
And wins Portia.
And Portia, even though she's bound by this will, you see her intelligence shine through. Her witty, sometimes pretty cutting judgments of the other suitors show she's got agency, even within these limits.
She doesn't hold back on some of them.
Not at all. But that casket lottery itself, it's brilliant writing. Shakespeare uses it to explore that whole theme of appearance versus reality.
Gold looks good, silver may be what you deserve.
Right, and lead seems worthless. But Bassanio has this moment of insight, doesn't he? He says, the world is still deceived with ornament. He sees past the flashy stuff.
Recognizes true value might be in something humble.
Exactly. It's not just dumb luck. It feels like his character connects with a deeper truth the play is getting at.
But while Bassanio's winning hearts and fortunes, something disastrous happens back in Venice. For Shylock.
Oh, yes. A huge turning point.
His daughter, Jessica. She elopes with Lorenzo, who's a Christian.
And she doesn't just leave.
No. She takes a load of her father's ducats and some jewels with her. Ouch.
It's utterly devastating for Shylock. And it absolutely pours fuel on his fire for revenge against the Christians. Losing the money is a blow, obviously, but it's more than that. There's that turquoise ring.
Ah, yes, the ring from Leah.
His deceased wife, Leah. He says, I had it of Leah when I was a bachelor. I would not have given it for a wilderness of monkeys. It wasn't about the cash value. It was a precious link to his past, to love.
And Jessica just trades it for a monkey.
Casually, carelessly. It just underscores how deep Shylock's connection is to his possessions. Not just greed, it's memory, identity, profound personal loss wrapped up in that wealth. It makes him incredibly human, even amidst his demands for vengeance.
So inevitably the news comes. Antonio's ships are lost, wrecked at sea. All of them. Complete financial ruin. He can't repay the loan. He has to face Shylock in court. And Shylock is now incandescent with rage. The old grudges, plus the fresh wound of Jessica's betrayal. He demands the bond be fulfilled. He demands his pound of flesh.
And the Duke, who's presiding, he's in a terrible bind. A huge legal and ethical mess. He admits he doesn't know how to deal with it.
Because if he just dismisses the bond, even this horrific one,
it would impeach the justice of his state. Venice's whole reputation as a center of commerce relied on sticking to contracts. Merchants from everywhere traded there because they trusted the law.
So upholding the law, even this law, felt paramount for the city's economy. He's trapped.
Completely trapped between the letter of the law and, well, basic humanity.
Enter Portia. The brilliant heroine from Belmont makes this dramatic entrance.
In disguise.
Completely disguised as a young male lawyer, Balthazar, supposedly sent by her learned cousin, Dr. Bellario, and Nerissa's there too, disguised as Balthazar's clerk. The courtroom tension is just off the charts. Antonio's life is literally on the line.
And Portia's performance in court is just masterful. Legal maneuvering, dramatic irony. It's incredible. First, she makes this beautiful, eloquent appeal to Shylock for mercy.
The famous quality of mercy speech.
Exactly. The quality of mercy is not strained. We'll definitely dig into that later. It's a stunning piece of rhetoric, framing mercy as this divine attribute.
But Shylock doesn't budge. He wants the law. I crave the law.
Right. He digs in his heels, and that's when Portia springs the trap. She uses his own insistence on the exact letter of the law against him.
Okay, the bond gives you a pound of flesh.
But T2, she points out, it says nothing about blood, not one drop. If Shylock sheds even a single drop of Christian blood while cutting the flesh,
According to Venetian law.
all his lands and goods are confiscated by the state. Boom. It's this stunning, ingenious reversal. His own weapon turned back on him.
And the fallout for Shylock is immediate and brutal. Loses the case, obviously. His wealth is split half to the state, half to Antonio.
And then the final blow.
He's forced to convert to Christianity, stripped of his faith, his identity. Antonio proposes this as an act of mercy. He'll let Lorenzo and Jessica inherit his half upon Shylock's death, but only if Shylock converts. It's presented as mercy, but it feels incredibly cruel.
Oh, it's profoundly cruel. Shylock's exit, he just says, I am not well. It's this moment of complete devastation, total isolation, the erasure of his pride, his religious identity, his entire way of life.
He's lost everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that forced conversion, looking back now, feels unforgivably spiteful, as some critics say. A total erasure of Shylock's identity. Not true charity. It likely had theological justifications back then, maybe socio-political ones, even financial ones linking conversion and commerce. But the effect is annihilation. It really highlights the human cost to those who have been excluded, as one scholar puts it. A deeply troubling shadow over the supposed happy ending that follows.
So Shylock is defeated, broken. Then Portia and Nerissa, still in their lawyer drag, they decide to have a bit of fun or maybe test their new husbands. They ask Bassanio and Graciano for the rings the men had sworn never to part with as payment for their legal services.
Rings the women themselves had given them.
Exactly. And the men, well, they hesitate, but Antonio pleads with them, and they give the rings away, breaking their vows.
And this ring trick, it leads to this comedic finale back in Belmont. The women reveal themselves, playfully scold their husbands. It lightens the mood after the darkness of the trial.
But it's more than just comedy, right?
Absolutely. It subtly reinforces themes of loyalty, trust, and it really demonstrates the women's intelligence, their ultimate control over their lords, in a way. It highlights that idea of marriage as mutual ownership, responsibility. It even echoes Shylock's constant cry of mine, but in a totally different relational context. Possessiveness and love versus possessiveness of wealth.
So the play wraps up. Bassanio and Portia, Graciano and Nerissa, seemingly happy. Jessica and Lorenzo are there too, set to inherit Shylock's money eventually.
And, just to tie up loose ends, Antonio gets news. His ships. They weren't lost after all. They've arrived safely in Venice, full of riches. His fortune is miraculously restored.
A neat, happy ending for the Christians.
Well, seemingly happy. But it feels precarious, doesn't it? Especially when you remember Shylock's fate. The play doesn't let you easily forget the human suffering that kind of underpins their newfound joy and prosperity.
Yeah, you're left wondering if their harmony is bought in part with Shylock's money, like you said. What's the real ethical cost?
Exactly. Who benefits and who gets utterly crushed in this pursuit of justice and happiness? It leaves you with some pretty uncomfortable questions. 2. Portraits and paradox. Analyzing key characters.
Okay, let's shift gears now and really dig into these characters. They're the heart of it, aren't they? Starting with Shylock, he's just unavoidable, the most complex, definitely the most controversial figure here.
Without it.
On the surface, he fits the stereotype of the era. Bitter, Christian, hating, money-grabbing, stingy man. That's how he's often initially presented. But there's so much more going on.
Oh, absolutely. You have to add the context immediately.
Yeah.
Shylock has incredibly strong reason for hating Christians, for wanting revenge. Look at how they've treated him, his community.
Right.
His villainy, you could argue, is precisely what the Christians have taught him through relentless abuse. Public insults, economic strangulation, spiritual humiliation.
Being called dog, spat upon.
Exactly. Systemic abuse, generation after generation. The play shows us a man pushed to the edge, seeking payback for that dehumanization.
And that deep resentment, that justification comes pouring out in the hath not a Jew eyes speech. Act 3, Scene 1. It's unforgettable.
It really is. Hath not a Jew eyes, hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons. He lists all these common human experiences.
Subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is. It feels like this powerful plea for shared humanity.
It does. Initially, if you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? But then comes the turn.
And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
That's the core of it.
Yeah.
If we are like you and the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why? Revenge.
And that chilling final line, the villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. Wow.
It's incredibly powerful, often quoted out of context as just a plea for empathy. But in context is Shylock's scathing justification for revenge. He's throwing Christian hypocrisy right back in their faces.
He's saying, you taught me cruelty, now watch me practice it better than you.
Precisely. It forces the audience, then and now, to confront the Christian's role in creating the very villain they despise. Now the debate rages on. Was Shakespeare trying to elicit sympathy, or just reinforcing stereotypes for his audience?
Given that Jews had been expelled from England centuries before.
Right. Shakespeare likely never met an openly practicing Jew. He'd be drawing on existing prejudices, stereotypes. But some argue his genius created a character far too complex for simple villainy, one that makes us grapple with the consequences of prejudice, regardless of intent.
And beyond revenge, there's that intense emotional connection to his possessions. Not just greed, that story about Leah's ring.
The turquoise ring, yeah.
Yeah.
Traded for a monkey by Jessica.
Yeah.
His reaction reveals so much. I would not have given it for a wilderness of monkeys.
It shows possessiveness, sure, but also this raw human vulnerability, a link to love to his past.
Exactly. For Shylock, wealth isn't just cash. It's tied up with identity, history, family survival in a hostile world. Losing that ring isn't just financial. It's this deep emotional wound. It shows his capacity for love, for sorrow, makes his downfall even more tragic.
Okay, let's talk Portia, the it girl of Belmont. Beautiful, rich, smart, everyone wants her. Seems like she has it all.
She does seem to. But remember, she's not totally in control. Her father's will, that casket lottery, it dictates her marriage choices. She complains about it herself. I may neither choose whom I would, nor refuse whom I dislike.
True.
Yet even within those constraints, she's constantly finding ways to assert her power, her intelligence. Cross-dressing as Balthazar is the ultimate example. It lets her operate with authority in a man's world, where women had virtually no public voice or legal standing. She actively manipulates the system.
But she's not perfect, is she? She has her own prejudices. That comment about the Prince of Morocco's dark skin.
If he have the condition of a saint and the complexion of a devil, I had rather he should shrive me than wive me.
Yeah, it's pretty blatant racism. Lines like that are often cut today. Understandably, they show a less appealing side.
So she's brilliant, she saves Antonio,
Yeah.
but she can also be sharp.
Sharp, calculating, even vicious at times. She doesn't just reject suitors, she mocks them. She condemns Shylock utterly, and she deliberately tests her own husband's loyalty with that ring trick. It's interesting how her power in the play often comes when she adopts that male role.
It really highlights the severe limitations on women then, doesn't it? And maybe the compromises needed to wield influence in that society.
What about Antonio, the merchant himself? Generous friend, especially to Bassanio, but starts off so melancholy, so down.
Yeah, that unexplained sadness is intriguing. But this seemingly noble guy, he's also a product of his time, prejudice and all. He openly insults and mistreats Shylock just for being Jewish.
Spitting on him, calling him names.
Exactly, criticizing his profession. And sadly, this behavior was pretty much within the norm for Christians back then. It shows how deeply ingrained that societal anti-Semitism was. Antonio just goes along with it.
And then in the courtroom, his big act of mercy is forcing Shylock to convert.
Which, as we said, feels incredibly strained today.
Yeah.
Unforgivably spiteful, many would argue. It's the erasure of Shylock's identity. Not just religious charity, but likely tangled up with theological ideas, social control, maybe even economics, the belief that conversion aided commerce. It strips Shylock bare.
Then Bassanio, Antonio's friend. Noble birth, but broke. And let's face it, his main reason for chasing Portia is her money. A lady richly left.
Yeah, it really makes you question, is he an impassioned lover or mostly a fortune hunter? His financial motives are right there on the surface. He needs her wealth to pay off his debts, keep up appearances.
He does seem to fall for her later, but the initial push is money.
It is. It adds this layer of ambiguity to him. He's not exactly a heroic figure in that pursuit.
And the fact he gives away her ring so easily later, despite promising never to.
Yeah, it suggests his priorities, doesn't it? Maybe a certain moral flexibility, or maybe just that his bond with Antonio outweighs even his marriage vow at that moment. He blames Antonio's insistence, highlighting how central that male friendship is.
Lastly, Jessica, Shylock's daughter. Elopes, converts, takes the money. Seems like the ultimate betrayal from Shylock's perspective. What's driving her?
Jessica is really defined by divided loyalties and this desperate need to belong somewhere else. She calls her father's house hell, says she's ashamed to be her father's child.
She wants out.
Desperately. But even after converting and marrying Lorenzo, she's still seen as an outsider. Lorenzo's friends call her a gentle and no Jew, like her acceptance is conditional on denying her origins.
So her actions, taking the money, even maybe exaggerating her father's cruelty,
could be seen as this desperate attempt to fit in, to gain acceptance from her new Christian circle. But you get the sense she never quite finds peace, never fully belongs anywhere, just adrift between two worlds. 3. Thematic deep dive. Law, love, and loathing.
Okay, let's pivot to the big themes, the ideas that make merchants so rich and, well, so challenging. Top of the list has to be justice versus mercy.
Absolutely central.
It explodes in the courtroom scene, obviously. Shylock stands firmly on justice, on the letter of the law. My deeds upon my head. I crave the law, the penalty and forfeit of my bond. For him, the law is his only shield, his only weapon.
And that's said directly against Portia's famous speech about mercy. The quality of mercy is not strained.
It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven. Beautiful imagery.
It is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes. She frames it as this divine attribute, something that makes earthly power godlike. A really powerful argument for compassion over strict legality.
But then the irony hits hard.
Right, because Portia, having made this eloquent plea for mercy, then uses a razor-sharp legal technicality to absolutely destroy Shylock. Not just denying the flesh, but taking his wealth, his faith, everything.
So was this speech genuine? Or just a tactic?
That's the question the play forces on you. Is it a sincere moral stance or a clever rhetorical move before delivering the knockout blow? It makes you really examine what mercy means in practice.
And Shylock's own insistence on the literal law becomes the very thing that ruins him. He demanded exact justice, and he got it, just not the way he expected.
The legalism he relied on turns back on him with devastating force.
So who is merciful in this play?
Yeah.
The Christians talk a good game about mercy.
But their actions towards Shylock, especially the forced conversion, seem anything but. And Shylock, stripped bare, basically asks them to kill him. Nay, take my life and all, you take my life, when you do take the means whereby I live.
It leaves you feeling deeply uneasy.
Completely. The play deliberately leaves that question hanging. Who's truly merciful? It exposes the potential hypocrisy, the gap between ideals and actions. It forces you, the listener, to wrestle with what true compassion looks like versus calculated power plays dressed up as benevolence.
Then there's the unavoidable, difficult theme, prejudice and discrimination. The anti-Semitism is just baked into the world of the play.
It reflects the realities of 16th century Venice and England, too. Jews were often restricted to certain jobs, like money lending, because others were closed off. Forced to wear distinct clothes, like Shylock's gabardine, marking them as different, often as inferior.
And Shakespeare himself, writing in England where Jews had been expelled,
likely absorbed the prevailing stereotypes and cultural anxieties. He probably never met an openly practicing Jew.
And the play reflects that prejudice.
Undeniably. The casual way Christians used Jew as an insult, Antonio's behavior, it was tragically normalized then. Even the pound of flesh itself might echo grotesque anti-Jewish stereotypes, the blood libel myths, even though it's Shylock's demand in the play. This pervasive hostility is the backdrop for Shylock's rage. It's a reaction to generations of being treated as less than human.
Which leads straight into that controversy. Is the play itself anti-Semitic, or is it about anti-Semitism? Critics like Harold Bloom argued it's done real harm over centuries.
And it's undeniable that it has been used that way. Nazi Germany loved the play, staged it constantly, often cutting Shylock's humanity, like the "hath not a Jew eyes" speech, to turn him into a pure monster for their propaganda.
Horrifying.
But interpretations change. By the 18th century, actors started playing Shylock more sympathetically as a tragic figure. Audiences began to pity him. So today, the approach isn't to ignore it, but to engage critically.
Read against the grain.
Exactly. Understand the historical prejudice it reflects, but challenge it. Use the play not to perpetuate stereotypes, but as a lens to examine prejudice itself, its mechanisms, its devastating impact. Study it more closely, as scholars suggest, because of these difficulties.
Okay, another huge theme, wealth and commerce. Money makes this world go round.
Oh, definitely. Venice's whole identity is built on trade, finance, lending.
And the play draws that distinction, doesn't it? Between Antonio's merchant adventuring ships, goods, risk.
Which is seen as noble, somehow, versus Shylock's usury making money from money, breeding it, which was viewed with suspicion, seen as unnatural by Christian theology.
Even though it was essential for the economy.
Right. This moral judgment on how wealth was made just added fuel to the fire of prejudice against moneylenders like Shylock.
And money clearly drives decisions. Bassanio needs Portia's wealth. Jessica takes her father's ducats when she elopes.
It influences everything, and crucially, that final harmony for the Christians. It's partly bankrolled by Shylock's confiscated fortune. Antonio's clear, Bassanio's rich, Jessica and Lorenzo inherit.
It all comes back to Shylock's money.
It raises profound questions about the cost of their happiness, the ethics of how wealth gets redistributed. Is their happy ending built on the ruin of another person? The play makes you sit with that discomfort.
Appearance versus reality is woven throughout, too. The caskets are the obvious example.
Gold glitters, but lead holds the prize. Don't judge by outward show.
And Portia and Nerissa's disguises are a literal playing with appearance.
Absolutely. Cross-dressing lets them access power denied to them as women. It physically embodies the theme, showing that intelligence and capability can be hidden beneath societal roles and expectations. Truth isn't always what's on the surface.
Finally, love and friendship. Antonio and Bassanio's bond kicks everything off.
That intense, almost self-sacrificial friendship is the catalyst for the whole plot. Antonio risks his life for Bassanio's romantic quest.
And then there's marital love, Portia and Bassanio, Nerissa and Graciano, tested by the ring plot.
Yeah, those rings symbolize fidelity, trust. And the men fail the test initially. The women have to teach them a lesson about commitment. It reinforces that idea of marriage involving mutual responsibility, mutual ownership.
And you mentioned how Shylock's cry of mine about his possessions echoes here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating link. The possessiveness of wealth, the possessiveness and expectations within love and marriage, suggesting all bonds, maybe, involve a sense of claim, of responsibility of what is mine and yours. 4. Echoes through time, modern relevance and enduring lessons.
So the Merchant of Venice isn't just a historical artifact, it still stirs things up today, doesn't it? That whole debate about anti-Semitism continues.
It really does. Whether Shakespeare intended it or not, the text can cause harm. We've seen it used for propaganda, seen it cause problems in schools. Its potential impact is undeniable.
So what's the response? Ban it. Ignore it.
Neither, really. The consensus among most scholars and educators is critical engagement. Understand the history, read it against the grain, challenge the prejudices it reflects. Don't shy away from the difficult parts, confront them. Use it as a tool to understand prejudice, not perpetuate it.
And its themes still hit hard today. Discrimination. It makes you think about anti-Semitism now, sure, but also Islamophobia, racism, any kind of othering.
The patterns are timeless, sadly. Dehumanization, stereotyping. The play reveals those mechanisms starkly.
And it makes you question legal systems, too, right? That tension between the strict law and the need for mercy.
Absolutely. The courtroom scene is a masterclass in that.
Yeah.
And Shylock's forced conversion.
Yeah.
It's a chilling example of how law or social pressure can become instruments of cruelty, not justice. It wasn't even necessarily theologically sound back then, according to some texts on conversion emphasizing free will.
Yeah.
When does sticking to the letter of the law become oppressive?
So, despite all the discomfort, all the challenges, what are the lasting lessons? Human dignity, tolerance, empathy, the dangers of hate. It's not exactly handing out easy answers.
No, definitely not. There are no simple takeaways. What it does is force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, our capacity for incredible cruelty, but also for compassion. It makes us question our own assumptions about justice, forgiveness, prejudice in our own lives.
It makes us look at the human cost of excluding people.
Precisely. Its power isn't in giving answers, but in provoking those deep questions, that self-reflection, that ongoing dialogue. It stays with you long after you finish reading or watching it. Outro.
Well, that was quite a journey. We've unpacked the intricate plot, met these complex, contradictory characters, and wrestled with the powerful, often deeply troubling themes of The Merchant of Venice. It's a play that sticks with you because it demands you engage with tough questions.
It really does. It's so much more than just a story. It's like holding up a mirror to society, then and now. It pushes us to look hard at our own biases, our own definitions of justice and mercy, and the real consequences of prejudice.
And as you think about this deep dive, maybe consider how easy it could be to be like Portia talking eloquently about mercy, but maybe failing to truly practice it, perhaps even using it strategically.
Or maybe like Shylock, clinging so tightly to a perceived right, a grievance, that you lose sight of shared humanity, choosing retribution over connection.
The play really asks us, doesn't it, when faced with suffering someone else's or even our own, what's the real measure of our compassion?
And what's the cost of pursuing what we think is just, especially if that justice destroys another person's dignity, their identity, their very life? It's a profound question, and one that feels as relevant and unsettling today as ever.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into The Merchant of Venice. We really hope it encourages you to continue exploring the complexities of this enduring and vital work.